All right. What is going on with that?
Monitor.
Welcome to the Helpful for Life morning show where we start perfectly on time every
morning,
time.
Every time. Yeah, it's sort of inbuilt. We have a clock, and it
Yes.
just tells us when it's time to start.
Yes, and that's, again, one of the things about continuous improvement is living that message yourself, right? And yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's how you know we're getting ready.
Yeah, we're ready now. So, we just doing a little bit behind the scenes work and fighting the software that, typically works every time, right? When you need it to.
Oh, every software I've ever used.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've never had any trouble with it.
I got to say, I think it's very fitting that we're having this discussion today. Because yesterday we were just talking about how spoiled we all are and how, there's magic. Or maybe that was the first day.
Yeah, first day, yeah.
Episode 0.
And it's so funny you bring it up because, of course, I'm still reading a book that is talking about magic.
Yeah.
And the idea with technology being that what we really want is not to deal with the problems of the world. What we really want is just to think something and have it magically appear for us.
Yeah. I mean, can you blame me?
No. I mean,
wouldn't that be cool?
Yeah, right. And then the issue is if we never actually have to practice anything, right? Then what do we think?
Yeah.
Right. Are our solutions provided for us? Is it, multiple choice test because we've never figured out how to be creative on our own because we've never encountered any problems we have to solve. So this is some of the fun things that I read late into the evening.
Yeah, for sure. Well, the good news is if you give it a couple years or so, the AI will figure it out for us, right?
Yeah. We don't even need humans anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's funny we brought that up because today we have a special guest, and I think he might disagree with that statement, seeing as he is the founder of the Feely Human Collective. And so that's one thing that, at least right now, and honestly probably forever, robots are not going to be able to do is that whole feeling thing.
Oh, yeah, but feelings are messy.
Yeah, I've found in my life that, who needs them, right?
Right.
It's better off without them.
Yeah, my wife just used to call me a robot all the time, and I thought our marriage was perfect when I was a robot.
Well, it probably was not. So anyways, I actually, for me, the journey on feelings has kind of it's kind of gone on overdrive over the last especially year and a half. I don't know if it's something about just always learning more and being more ascendant and becoming more woke and all of those things, or maybe it just is, maybe it has something to do with the fact of not knowing what's going to happen, seeing your bank account go down continuously for years at a time, and, just having some uncertainty. I don't know. Maybe that's related.
Kind of weird. Yeah, the other thing is not being able to pursue your ambitions recklessly. That has meant that a lot of people got kind of stymied. There was this little quarantine thing that sort of locked us in place.
Yeah.
And made us deal with ourselves.
Yeah, for sure.
And I wonder if that has in any way impacted a kind of return to emotionality, right? It's like, oh, I could ignore these things whenever I could go outside and find something to do.
Right.
But now I'm stuck here with myself, and these damn emotions just keep rising up and overwhelming me.
And I think, honestly, that feelings are, in a lot of ways, something that a lot of people leave repressed, right? And especially as men, and especially as men in America, and especially as men from the South, right?
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, it's thickly woven into our culture. You take the feelings and you squash them down, you man up, and it is a whole lot to do with sort of like embodying a certain ethos, and that ethos, it's taught to us culturally. And there's a certain violence that you do to yourself to become this thing. And it works on both sides too, right? Because females have it as well. It's just a different range of it that they have to take on than men do. And so I find the whole topic to be super fascinating. I did a lot of work on cultural violence about 10, 15 years ago. And a lot of it involved weapons. And
Wow.
the idea of like how weapons become a handed down symbol. And this comes into cultures of honor and authority and those kind of things. There are reputational cultures that are based on how you present yourself. And how you present yourself becomes your ability to survive. And at that point, an emotion at the wrong time, in the wrong way, that's into your reputation. And so when we continue to sort of perpetuate systems that judge that quickly, we're going to run into trouble with how we regulate ourselves.
Yes, absolutely. And before I get to that point, I feel like maybe, 15 minutes into the show, since we've been going for 15 minutes now, since we started totally on time,
As usual.
we should maybe introduce ourselves. So without further ado, I'm Breed Garcia, the founder and CEO of Helpful for Life.
Ryder Richards, art guy, co-host,
An all-around dude.
a dude, total dude,
Yeah.
man dude. Like, I'm starting to get old. I don't even know if dude applies anymore. Maybe it always applies.
That's a good question. I remember back in elementary school, it was like, hey, you know what a dude is? It's a hair on an elephant's butt.
Oh, man. That's
Yeah.
right up there with Dingleberry.
Yeah, the dingleberries used to be funnier until you had a dog. Then you actually had to deal with dingleberries. They're not quite that funny
not so
anymore.
funny all of a sudden.
Especially when the other day, here in this very lovely studio, which you think would be a sacred, respected place by everyone, but especially those of us in our family, right? Well, little did I know, our dog Lincoln, who you'll surely see on this show eventually, once we figure out that third camera angle,
Yes,
that's continuous improvement. Well, he decided it would be a good idea to do one of those butt scratching things. And for those of you at audio only, you're missing this visual element, but I'll demonstrate for you guys. You go like this, and you kind of like scoot your butt across, and it might have looked like I was just humping you. I realize that in hindsight.
Yeah.
So Ryder, tell me, how does that make you feel?
I don't know. I'm getting multiple emotions.
Yes. It's hard
A little
to
excited, a little scared.
It's hard to let the action of me humping you in the air, at least that's what it looked like, to not let that distract from the story. But anyways, my dog Lincoln was scratching his butt, not humping, all over the floor, and he had a dingleberry. And it's like, so we came up and we saw the streak, and I was like, it's not where I'm used to seeing skid marks, but I guess we'll clean that one up.
Yeah, dogs are amazing creatures, in that they can, take us back to sort of reality. We can think something is sacred, and then a dog comes in and, dingleberry streaks.
Yeah,
all
absolutely.
Over. Yeah.
And, I joke because, joking is one of the ways we deal with emotions, right?
Yes.
But I'm glad that Lincoln happened to come up, because he's been one of the things for me that has been a good reminder. I found myself, especially, dealing with all this entrepreneur stuff. And then, I personally like to say that I didn't think COVID really affected me that much. And some of that, honestly, maybe it was just because the classic, white guilt or privilege guilt, where it's like, hey, it didn't really affect me that much. Like, I was already an entrepreneur, and I was already working from home, and all these types of things.
You had lived in an RV.
Yeah, exactly.
You had been prepping for this without even knowing.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, I know what happens when you don't have water and how hard it is to find. But yeah, so I realized over the last few months that I think it had a bigger impact on me than I realized. And largely, I think that's because I'm very much a huge extroverted person. I've never lived by myself, not even once, which, I probably should at some point, and learn to be better alone and more comfortable with myself and all those types of things. But one step at a time, man. I'm a Southern
if it
man.
ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah. Great question. Yeah, great. A great point.
Actually, yeah, I get that a lot at work. People will say this, and that phrase drives me bonkers. But we can talk about that later. But that's another emotion that wells up, right?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, is when people say things like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And I'm like, no, it's exactly when you should be looking at fixing it.
Yeah, this whole concept of preventative maintenance, right? And it's funny, we're talking about the South. We're talking about if it ain't broke. The thing that popped into my head was freaking John Deere's, and how, I don't know if you've heard about the right to repair laws, but that's a thing now where it's like, oh, they sell you the John Deere, and then their big long terms of service, they say, you don't actually really own this thing, and you're just kind of renting it. And maybe that's not the exact verbiage, but the main verbiage is like, hey, you can't open that thing up, or like you avoid everything and you're not going to get any support, much less be able to order the parts from the manufacturer to replace it. Like, the good old days when your car, you could replace the things and get all the parts and all that
you
kind
turn,
of stuff.
you don't have a belt, so you use pantyhose. And there's all these things, but now the black box is turned into the green tractor.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
But, there's something as well about this idea of maintenance that we're, and if it ain't broke, don't fix it kind of thing that comes back to mental health. And and you've brought this up a couple times on the show is, why can this not be something, mental health in general, be like a grounding wire? Can this not be something like going to the dentist monthly, getting your check in, and this being so common that we don't take it for granted, we don't judge it, we don't think about it in any other way except for, oh yeah, well that's natural and that's healthy and we should do this.
Yeah, for sure. And I just want to make sure to point out that one of our lovely commenters, Danielle, has pointed out that dude is a gender neutral term. So especially important to know in this day and age where went from 2 genders to a spectrum of genders, and I'm sure we'll talk about that a little bit more in the future.
Yes,
technically the other day.
We need to prep in the past to bring this into the future.
Yes. It's a time-space continuum over here. Oh my goodness.
Spatiotemporality. Yeah. I think that I like the idea of dude being gender neutral. I think all terms would be more fun if they were.
Yes, and they also add a little bit of confusion, maybe in some cases too.
Why not? Let's just throw it in there now. Get people to quit thinking in that binary.
Yeah, for sure. You're saying it's not all black and white; it's just in the middle. Thank you. We're here. We're here till Thursday.
Yes, we have summed it up once again.
Once again, that's what the lovely takeaways you get here from the Helpful for Life morning show. But yeah, when it comes to this preventative maintenance, I'm all about shifting this towards this, just something you do, right? And it's a checkup you do. And just like a doctor, or like if you're talking about a car, it's the preventative maintenance. You change your oil, you change your tires, you change your windshield wiper blades, all those types of things that you ideally are doing, right?
Yeah, you should be doing.
Yeah. And of course, like, we don't expect everyone to be waking up every morning and having their first therapist at breakfast, their second therapist at lunch.
Right. Their 11sies. Yes. Yeah. No, I completely... I think it's just something that has been kind of eschewed or pushed aside in our culture, and a lot of men especially end up doing things like therapy and mental health on the sly.
Yeah,
they're afraid to talk about it, and then the fascinating thing about that is, then how do your friends know it's okay for them to do it as well? And there's you're right, in the South there is very much a machismo that runs through the culture, and to actually admit that there might be problems that you could fix by talking to somebody, this is just mind-blowing.
Yeah. No, and especially, which is really important to think about, and one thing that I've realized more than ever, especially as a solo entrepreneur, a knowledge worker, if you will, someone who's working with ideas, creating ideas, things like that, more and more so, I've realized how important that mind space is. And I think it's one of the most underrated things, honestly. And it's easy for people to get kind of tired of it. And especially now when you come to vulnerability and some of these buzzwords that have been coming up more and more lately. But you know what? I think that's probably a little bit enough of the intro today. Before we have more of that conversation with Known, we don't want him to come in and us have already figured everything out we always do.
I just had a zinger, but I'll hold on to
it. Okay, good. Yeah, we'll pretend you'll remember that one later.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So today is also an exciting day because it is National Coffee Day.
Oh.
Yeah, cheers to that.
Cheers.
Yeah.
As usual, I am a massive coffee drinker. I don't know if that's probably not the right adjective.
Oh, I don't think you should use some more body positive terms when you're talking about yourself. Massive is a little strong.
Yeah, no, I drink probably 4 to 5 cups of coffee in the morning. Sometimes I have coffee after lunch as well. I try to slow down around 4 or 5 o'clock with coffee, but I've been told this is too much.
Yes. There's no way around it. If for those of you who are familiar with alcohol, when you go to the I don't know, anywhere, and you're in the car and you're driving and you just had a couple drinks and you get pulled over, they have you blow, and it's called a BAC, a blood alcohol content. Well, I think you've got a CAC, a caffeine alcohol. No, actually, that'd be a BCC, a blood caffeine content. You're off the scales, man.
Whew, but you wouldn't imagine all the stuff I can get done.
Yes.
Man.
You know, it's interesting thing. For those of you who aren't familiar, I kind of learned this actually earlier this year about the introduction of caffeine into society. And, you know, we haven't said it yet on our show, but I want to make sure that we do say it. There's a lot of things that we may not get right. Whoa, big surprise there. And there's a lot of things that we'll get partially right, mostly right, and then me in particular, I get everything right, as we covered yesterday.
Right. There's just going to be a whole floating set of asterisks and disclaimers above anything that I say. But, Reed will be here to correct me. So
yes, we brought Ryder on for the comic relief,
Oops.
But yeah,
I thought I was just supposed to cackle into the microphone.
Yes. Yeah, that the comic relief, jester, I don't know.
Punching bag. Oh, wait.
Poop slinger. Oh, look, there's Lincoln now. He wants to join it. I hear him barking in the background. But yeah, we have back in the day, before things like germs were known about and stuff like that, you had to do something to make stuff safe to drink. The water was not safe to drink. And so historically speaking, the way that they did that, one of the main ways at least, was making alcohol.
Oh, right. No, yeah, because alcohol kills germs.
Exactly. That's what I say every time I drop food on the ground. Just follow it with a shot. It kills all the germs.
Yes, that's, I've tried to take that advice when I'm in Mexico. They say you can't drink the water, and they're like, well, you can. You just have to chase it with tequila.
Tequila, yes.
It doesn't really work for
me.
No. I mean, it does work. I do get drunk, but I also get sick, so yeah.
Yeah. I think that might be related to the 8 tequila shots and not the quality of the water,
I don't know.
That's neither here nor
there. I
get
sick every time I'm in Mexico now.
Ooh,
so,
okay. Well, maybe you should, build a wall or something.
That'd take a lot of work.
Yeah. But yeah, so back in the day, that's what they did. They had largely beer, and of course there was wine. These forms of alcohol that, believe it or not, people drank actually throughout the day. Yeah. And honestly, they were just doing their duty. Like they needed to stay hydrated, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, that was it was just what you needed to do. You needed to wake up in the morning. Also, I mean, interesting thing about Guinness, right? Very low alcohol content, but high in calorie consumption. And that was, of course, so that the soldiers on the front line could have calories.
Liquid bread,
man. It was a way to consume energy.
It's funny how that used to be a feature that now is almost a flaw in the eyes of most people, right?
Now we have Michelob Ultra or whatever, Ultra Super Light. I don't even know what they are now.
Ultra Super Light. Is that what they call you in Mexico when you're getting sick from all that tequila?
Yeah, I take one shot of tequila and I just pass out. They're like, oh, Ultra Super Light.
Ultra Super Light. I like that. But yeah, so whenever like tea and coffee and the idea of the coffee house, here in America, that's called Starbucks, but the idea of this common gathering space where people were coming together, and instead of having alcohol, which is a depressant, which a lot of people forget about. It's like, oh yeah, drink to be happy. Like, well, it's a depressant. Mix things with that one. But once they had that common gathering space, people started drinking, tea and coffee together in this space, and instead of being depressed, they're stimulated.
Yeah, and then we get to see what that brings, right? I mean, it does. It's kind of a fascinating idea now. At all points, we're sort of either caffeinating or depressing. They're stimulating or depressing ourselves, right? So in the morning, we have a ritual of stimulating ourselves. And then in the evening...
Well, Ryder, let's keep the show on topic here. But yes, please tell us more about your morning routine.
4 to 5 cups of stimulation every morning.
Oh my goodness, that's a mental picture I did not need. But I appreciate you sharing that. But what Ryder was trying to say was, as people were getting stimulated and the greater effect that it actually had on society, and there were more ideas flowing, more things got done, which is, you know, in hindsight, it makes sense. Like, okay, you give everyone, you know, in 2021, like, okay, you have a study group of 1,000 people and you give them beer every day, all day. Then you have a study group of 1,000 people and you give them caffeine all day, every day. And you put them together in spaces where they can work together. And you've got people like Ryder who are just like, a dude and an artist and whatever all those
Totally
things he said he
duty.
was.
Yeah.
And then you've got all these other people and you work together to create things. More stuff starts getting created and happens.
Yeah, it is kind of fascinating sometimes how these, little technological innovations, such as just something like being able to import coffee or tea, like how that actually shifts an entire society, and then the cultural rituals that go with it. And then all of a sudden productivity is a thing, and we're super interested in productivity. And then we also, of course, need to look at what that has done to us that might be actually negative rather than positive. So it's just kind of one of the things that I think about on occasion is, if I do drink all this coffee, am I sort of participating in or partaking in some sort of cultural construct that is telling me, yes, indeed, you need to be productive? And then I immediately go home in the afternoon, anytime after 5, slam a couple drinks so that I can take myself back down to fall asleep. So I get on this sort of, I don't know, roller coaster. And I would love to be able to blame it on society, but I am of my own free will participating in this.
Wait, you're telling me that you are doing something that isn't society's fault? Your actions and your responsibility, you can play a part in that system?
Yeah, apparently I'm what they call a blame absorber.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, I
That's
take
good.
it on to myself.
Yeah, you know, actually, I just want to make sure we have very specific roles here on this show, and our punching bag and our absorber is Danielle.
Oh,
So-
thank goodness. So I can quit carrying this heavy burden.
You can. Although maybe you should have a couple drinks and reflect on that and see how that makes you feel.
Right. Coffee or booze? Yeah.
Yeah, you know, and it goes hand in hand. This stimulant and this depressant, like a lot of people don't really think about the effects of how it does make you feel and how it affects you, right? For example, a common mistake, by the way, with any type of drug, which in case you aren't aware, alcohol is a drug. Caffeine is a drug.
Whoa.
They are things that change your brain and your chemical mix up. That's what they call it in the science
Mix-up?
text. The
The
chemical
mix-up.
mix-up. Yeah, it reminded me of your downstairs mix-up from,
Yes.
from old Greg. In case you haven't seen that one, you'll need to watch that one. It's an old
okay.
BBC YouTube classic. I don't know if you
Okay.
ever heard BBC and YouTube said in the same sentence, but
That was kind of weird.
yeah,
Yeah.
But yeah, this whole the whole concept of like getting the dosage right. That's one of the areas which you're a perfect case. Like for those of you at home, this is what you will turn into if you have too much stimulation. One more sec. Let's get a close up of that just for those at home. So, wow, that
Wait, did it actually? Oh, I think the camera delayed. I didn't actually get to
that's
see
honestly it.
There.
You know, I think what's happening is, you know, you try and pull up another piece of email software to see what's going on, and then everything just hits the fan. So that's the thing about live broadcasting, though. You just get to keep going. And for those of you who are at home, like, man, do I still need to keep looking at Ryder? The question is yes. I mean, the answer is yes.
No.
What else do you need to look at? So yes, you know, here we are. We're talking about feelings. We're talking about stimulants. We're talking about depressants. And hopefully shortly we will be joined by our guest. I'm going to check in on that real quick and see what's going on. And, you know, why don't you... You know, I think this will be a fun one, right? So for those of you who have been paying attention on day 0 and day 1, you might have heard the fact that Ryder is actually... this is part of his interview. Like he doesn't know it in his contract that we've never had written up, but I could fire him at any time because Texas is an at-will employment state.
That's right.
Yes.
And you're an entrepreneur.
Yeah, and I get to do what I want. Right? I am all powerful. That's why I intentionally make my chair higher than yours to show the superiority, despite the fact that I'm only 5'7" 3/4 and you're probably what 6'2".
No. 6. Let's just say 6.
Just to be clear, we're not talking about that morning ritual anymore. We're talking about your height.
Oh. Oh, can we keep going? I don't want to talk about both of those.
Good redirection there. But yeah, so the part of the interview process here is to put you on the spot with no prep at all and see how well you can handle something by yourself.
No.
So let's hear what Ryder has to say.
Doom. Let's see. What I guess I'm thinking about emotional regulation in terms of caffeination and alcohol. I'm still spinning on this just a little bit in my head. One of the things I guess I'm thinking about there is sugar as well. Almost anything we put into our body has kind of a chemical reaction. And of course that if it can sort of pass the blood-brain barrier, right, it's going to affect how we think about things, how we interact with the world. And all of this means that we're constantly self-regulating, not only through what we take in through our mouth, but of course also how we can regulate our emotions. And the one thing Reed was talking about when we were talking about mental health that I kind of find interesting is that your brain is the one thing you take with you everywhere. You take your body with you when you go outside, right? But when we're doing Zoom calls and things like that, all you've got is your brain. And if you can't sort of regulate your emotions in some way, or at least be aware of them, then every interaction you have might not go according to script, according to plan, and it might get out of control because you're just not sure what's going to come out next.
Not sure what's going to come out next, which is what I was a second ago when I kind of tossed that ball there for you, Ryder. So well done. I would say that you did a good job, but to be honest, I was only half listening.
That makes two of us.
Yeah, well, I mean, honestly, that's probably what the people at home are doing as well. So
yeah, we should probably give them something to do right now too.
Yeah.
I want you to all get down and give me 25 push-ups.
Oh wait, you're saying there are other ways to simulate that stimulant effect that caffeine can give you, other than just taking caffeine?
It sounds weird, but yeah. And now I'm personally not going to take that path because it requires a lot more effort.
Yeah, yes.
But
magic pill and magic, right?
Magic,
come
right,
full circle,
right. But for our listeners, this is about you becoming better, not Reed and I becoming better.
As we've, as a wise man, probably a man, let's be real, once said, those who can't do, teach.
Yes. Here we are.
And here we are, failing forward, living by example, trying to do worse ourselves to help you feel better at home.
Yeah, I think this is going to keep happening too. You're going to get to witness every day a little more failure.
Yes.
And hopefully it's a little bit like a train wreck, but like the good kind.
Yeah, the endearing kind of train wreck. It's only cargo.
I don't know. Maybe it's like stuffed animals in the train.
Oh, and then it happens to be in an orphan village.
And it's like a piñata that explodes with toys.
Yes.
Yes.
We'll just ignore the fact that some of them would be like flaming as they fly through the sky and fall into the children's air.
No. Yeah, we have to keep the fantasy real here, and too much reality breaks the fantasy.
Keep the fantasy real. What a statement there. So this just in, we are having a change of plans. We're going to have known on another day, which is good because honestly, regardless of if we had him today or in the future, there's so much we could talk about when it comes to mental health and things like that. And we're hoping to have him as a recurring guest so we can dive into all of those things. But until we get to that, let me ask you a question, Ryder.
Oh, boy.
What is one thing within the last week where you've just been like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do now?
This show, really. Yeah. This has been,
yeah.
Honestly, the hardest part of this show for me so far has been having to wake up.
For sure. Amen.
I had gotten into this lovely groove of not having to wake up until close to 8 o'clock. And then I could do a little bit of work from home and then cruise into downtown McKinney without having to contend with traffic. So getting my head wrapped around getting up early and fighting just a tiny bit of traffic, I'm getting sort of flashbacks to when I used to commute for about 3 hours every day.
You used to commute for 3 hours every day?
Oh, yes. It was lovely. Yeah. And so, you can burn through a lot of audiobooks, but over time I just built up a lot of rage.
Yes.
Weird.
So wait, let me just paint a mental picture for those of you at home. Here's Ryder getting into his car, I'm ready to go. Got a 3-hour drive and 4 cups of coffee. Let's go.
I would actually have like a bandolier of this coffee just strapped onto my chest.
Sometimes, when you're passing somebody, you can't quite reach into that extra cup of coffee. So you grab the 5-hour energy and you throw one of those
just
back.
Throw one.
Yeah, just like a little
all
quick
the way.
shot.
Yeah, for some reason, it would be really funny if I got fired from that job for being too enthusiastic, but that wasn't really what happened.
Well, man, 3-hour commute. That sounds like the type of thing that I used to hear in LA when we lived out in LA. And honestly, man, and I'd be curious to hear why you did that, frankly. But I think the answer for most people is that's just the way life circumstances happened. And in the case of LA, it's like I want and or need this job that happens to be where most of civilization is densely populated and concentrated. And I want to live in a place that I can afford, which is a whole other topic in and of itself.
Oh, yeah.
And so therefore, I'm going to have to move far enough away to where I can afford the thing, at least to get maybe the type of living space that I want. And then I have to do this commute, which is like, wow, talk about freaking autonomous driving, man. Like, get on board, people. You want autonomous driving.
Yes.
You know how many billions or trillions of man hours are wasted in the car every year? Much less, the crashes that happen with that one. They're not as happy as that railroad
No.
crash.
You don't have the piñata of toys.
Yes.
No, it's one of those fascinating things, and I can real briefly kind of sum up why we did it. Is we moved here, and as my wife and I are both artists, not knowing how in the world to make money except for to teach, right? Of course, we make art objects all the time, but as true artists, we make objects that no one wants to buy, because I guess that means you're real or something.
Yes, for sure.
Anyway, yeah, I've kind of gotten over some of that, but there was these sort of cultural stipulations that were in place. And to maintain a job so that we could afford the house, I had to bring in money somehow, and the only way I knew how to do it was to teach. So I was teaching down in Mesquite and just making that drive down there and back every day, and it was kind of a fascinating time period because, of course, I also thought I was doing it for my career, so it was reputational and it was about building something, and so in that regard, I could project into the future and say this is necessary now. This would just be a temporary blip. Fascinating that I now no longer work there and have a different job completely, which doesn't require any of those things. And I'm only sort of marginally still in this art world where I make a living or make work that's based on that. And the reputation in that space is no longer as relevant to me. So it makes me really see now how much value I put into who I thought I was, let's say 10 years ago.
Yeah, no, that's a really interesting point. And I want to get back to that reputation aspect and how that plays in society. But I also wanted to point out that, honestly, we're probably better off because, again, those who can't do teach. So we already have someone who was a teacher here as well. And the only thing I can imagine and hope, and I have no idea what age you were teaching, there had to have been some fart jokes in there.
It was college.
It was college.
Yeah,
See?
yeah.
I don't know. What were you teaching?
Art, of course. I was teaching sculpture, art appreciation, design, and drawing. Occasionally, I would teach painting as well. And it was funny. I was at this art residency a couple months ago, and that's just basically 8 artists all living together for a month making work. And one of the things that we were talking about was their teaching load. And their teaching load is something like 2 or 3 classes per semester. I think I had 7 classes per semester, while also teaching on or operating on 6 to 7 committees. And so the workload was also about double any other professor that I've ever bumped into. And so that's also these kind of fascinating things you can get into is if you would get better simply by doing something, then I was getting like twice as good as everyone else every year. But I don't know if it actually panned out that way.
For sure. I mean, there's that entire balance of how deep do you go into a thing versus trying to do all of the things, right? And it's a constant struggle, and it's one worth having, right? Because there's value in both, right? There's value in being that person who goes into the one thing or one topic or one skill way, way, way deep. We need those people to specialize like that, and that's how we get a lot of the advancements in technology, art, literature. And, if you, for example, if you have a guy who decides to just completely focus on how to analyze life and make it better for other people, like sometimes it takes someone to take that sacrifice for the greater good of society.
I've heard of these saints,
Yes.
that just really go out of their way to figure out everything for us, so we don't even have to try anymore. They're going to package all the ideas up into this nice, maybe a morning show or something like
Yes,
that,
yes.
and just hand it over to us, and our lives will just be instantly better.
And I don't know if this is exactly how it works for those type of people, but if I can't remember if they need to be English or not, but it sounds like those people should be knighted.
Oh. We could do a knighting ceremony at some point if we ever find one of those people.
If we ever find one of
And
those people.
I'll make a sword.
And then fall on
That's really that's really what I want to do with my time, I think, is just make weird objects. I don't know if I actually want to do any kind of real job. I think just learning how to make things like trebuchets and swords might be my next career.
For sure. So, I said I wanted to talk a little bit more about that society and reputation aspect, and we're just going to do so here in like 2 minutes, and then we're going to move on. But the one thing that I wanted to bring up was, I don't know if you've heard of it or seen it, but there's a Black Mirror episode where, think of Yelp or Google reviews or any sort of rating service, right? 5 stars. Like every time you had an interaction with a person, you rated them. Yeah. And that was a sticky reputation that they had everywhere they went. And of course, they had augmented reality or something, if I remember correctly, or at the very least, they could hold up their phone to any person and then scan them to see what their reputation was. And, of course, being Black Mirror, things devolve and things get really bad, which for those of you who aren't familiar, Black Mirror is a Netflix show, which is a really interesting one to watch.
And I think that one is called something like Social Capital or something like that.
Yeah, so look it up. It's on Netflix, and it's a really cool show because they take little aspects of our society and then they amplify them to be like, this is what the worst case could be. So to give you another example and a little bit of a warning, if you don't like or you get triggered by or have some issue with any one of the episodes, they're all very different. Each one is more. They're not really a series in any sense of the thing. Each one is its own thing. So there's a certain something in the first episode, if I recall correctly, related to bacon and politics. And a little bit of that motion I was doing earlier towards you, minus the butt scooching. So yes,
La la la.
Yeah,
la,
it brings up some good memories there for you.
Your happy place.
Yeah, it's your happy place. But yeah, so check out Black Mirror because of that, and it's interesting to see because a lot of times, sometimes it's like, whoa, way over there, it would never happen like that. But then there's times where it kind of lines up, and you could definitely see like, wow, and also in different parts of the world. So for example, this reputation economy, in some ways, that is going on right now in China.
Yeah. With don't they have like an entire village that's basically being run on social capital, and it determines things like where you sit on the bus and all these kinds of very small, almost sort of, I don't know what you would call those. It's almost like a microtransaction for the ease of your life, but also a prestige, right? There is prestige and hierarchy in where you sit, and everyone can kind of see these things. So it's very physically evidenced, the gap between who behaves properly and who does not.
Yes. Yeah, and so one other example of something that they do, which I believe this is China as well, is if somebody does, let's just say, some petty type of crime like jaywalking, they put that person on a giant billboard to like point them out and be like, hey, this person jaywalked or what have you. And,
this is so funny.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. It's a societal shaming in a positive way.
Oh, that's the fascinating thing about any kind of shame, right? Is whether or not it actually is positive. Yeah, it is definitely social pressure. What's also sort of fascinating is I interviewed a guy a while back on my podcast about, and he has a podcast called China Unraveled, and his name is Jason Seftil, and he talks about how through surveillance technology, they have per capita lowered the cost of controlling their population. So you don't need as many police when your citizens are doing the policing for you, when people are internally policing themselves. So
I just want to make sure, we're in Texas here. We all have guns, and we do that down here too.
Yeah, we police ourselves. Yeah.
But the good news is we don't worry about our feelings, but we got the guns.
Yeah. And so there will be no emotion whenever something negative happens.
Yeah,
to you.
like a train crash. Exactly.
Yes,
You don't have to worry
no
about
emotion
that
at all. Yeah.
So part 3 of Ryder's interview, I'm going to push it to you to daily challenge. We talked a little bit about mental health. We didn't get too much into the actionable side of things or what some of that stuff might look like, which I'm sure we'll get into many times in the future. But if you had to give the average person one tip to put into their lives, something to help with their mental health or encourage them to be more cognizant of it, something along those lines, what is something you'd encourage a viewer to do?
I think the thing that has helped me the most over the last year and a half is meditation. I know that that's almost a trope, especially for a somewhat educated white guy to say, right? And we've talked about this before, but I think it is fascinating to watch how out of control your mind is. And that's the thing that I've learned the most, is that my mind is constantly running. And if you ever think you have something figured out, but you can't sit down and be calm for 5 minutes, there's something going on, right?
Yeah, and the interesting thing with that is there's so much natural resistance that people have to trying that.
Yeah.
And like most things, I think that ends up, if you trace it down towards the root cause, do the analysis to figure out why people do that, I think it just comes down to fear. Like most things, right? And then also, I don't know what other people think. What will I find out? All those types of things.
So
right?
Do you think that it just has a baggage with it?
I do. And honestly, just for those of you at home who are interested in meditation, especially if you've hesitated and never done that type of thing before, I don't know exactly the format it's going to be, but this is something that I'm going to dive into with some other content. And I'm going to be interviewing and working with some people who teach things like yoga and meditation. And I'm going to ask them all the questions that people have and all the hesitations that they have. And I'm going to think through some of those myself, because I myself, freaking every single book you read about a successful person or an entrepreneur or someone who's aware of their feelings and things like that, like all these positive things that make someone a good person, like 9 out of 10 of them mention meditation, right?
Yeah, I think that's what actually swayed me into it, because
all these people can't be wrong, which is a perfectly good line of thought.
Yeah, because that hasn't happened in history before.
Right.
Yeah. No, I think there's something about hearing how, oh man, it gets me so worked up whenever you hear about all the entrepreneurs in the world, and every one of them follows these 5 or 7 behaviors, and then you read about it on Medium, and then it becomes every article you see after that, the 7 behaviors of the 7 richest people or whatever, and then the idea that you're somehow supposed to emulate this. And there was a guy that had a really funny tweet the other day, but how can you become a millionaire if you don't take cold showers?
Yeah.
Because that becomes the other problem, is if you're just sort of manifesting it to try to get to this other end state, maybe it's
in
not
a short amount of time. Of course,
yes,
like
we're
that
hacking
magic pill.
ourselves. Yes.
No, it can certainly get too far down there, but the main point there was we are going to explore some of those questions as to why people don't want to do it, what meditation even looks like, because by the way, everyone likes to think that the stereotypical picture of meditation is something like this, which we'll leave you with for the next 30 minutes.
What am I still supposed to do? I couldn't even hold it for 2 seconds.
Yeah. But that's not what meditation has to look like. Even just yesterday we were talking about taking some joy and some focus into the thing that you're doing, and that can be a little bit of a meditative act itself, right? The main point, and from my gleaning of meditation, is it's letting yourself be with your own thoughts, giving yourself the time and space to process things, and also figuring out how to kind of make that brain slow down and stop thinking things, right? Another thing too that people do as they're meditating is they feel like they're failing because I started thinking. It's like, well, yeah, that's gonna happen.
And that's the other kind of misconception, is people kind of think like blank mind. but that's not actually, I don't think, very accurate. And there's multiple forms of meditation, and when you really start digging, there's a whole lot. And I think one of the things that sort of swayed me was hearing Naval Ravikant talk about how he does meditation almost like his brain is an inbox full of emails, and he just needs to work through each one of those ideas.
Yeah.
And so he sits there and he processes the idea for a few minutes, and it's like, check, got it. And then he moves on to the next one, and he thinks, and eventually he will have emptied his inbox and he'll be fine.
Yeah.
And so there's this kind of idea that you could just spend, 10 minutes every day just going through your mental inbox. But once it's a sort of mapped out practice, once you actually dedicate that time to it, well, then that's meditation.
Yeah. So that's your challenge for today, ladies and gentlemen, and other types of genders that we referenced earlier, is to figure out a way to try meditation at least one time. And I will actually, for it to really be effective and for you really to get something out of it, I think I would encourage you to try it at least 5 times, because the natural thing is you do it once, you feel like you're failing at it, and then like, oh, I'm never going to do that thing again, right? And so I want to make sure to encourage you to try it at least once and try different forms, try different things. There are apps for this, big surprise. There's websites, you can go on YouTube to learn a whole bunch more. And of course, we're going to give you guys some education on this eventually as well, which if you're here from the future, we'll have linked somewhere, and below, above, or, one of these places. And then, but yeah, so try and incorporate some meditation, and maybe that's going for a walk, maybe that's doing dishes or something like that. But the main point is take a second to slow down, and like we were talking about yesterday, the consume versus produce. Like in this day and age, we're doing so much consuming. We're getting barraged with so much information, both from the media, from our friends, text messages freaking all the time, which from scrolling Helpful for Life TikTok, go follow us right now. All of those various things are just coming at us all day, and we need to give ourselves the time and the space to process. And that's important, one, just for your sanity, but two, like you might be surprised like how much better that can make your life, especially if you're someone who has anxious tendencies, and you find yourself on edge, or if you're really stressed out, like especially those things, right? But really for anyone.
Yeah, the other lovely thing about it is that it is free. You can buy an app. I love the idea of telling somebody to go to therapy. But what if that person is unemployed and they've got all these other anxieties around money? I think that's very difficult to tell somebody to now go spend more money to take care of your mental health.
Yeah.
So I'm a big fan of meditation as something that you can do anywhere. Once again, if you're carrying your mind with you everywhere, and this is your gateway to everything you interact with in the world, I don't know, taking a few minutes to sort of listen to it, to hear what's going on there. And sometimes it can be traumatic. I have a friend who, when she meditates, she tends to cry a lot. And that's because it can be difficult just to listen to your mind.
Well, and that's because, and I'm not going to speak for your friend, right? But for a lot of the times, you're actually thinking about and dealing with those things that you've never given yourself the time and the space to process, right? And so that's why it's to be so valid, and so important. This is a very important type of preventative maintenance you can do, and why we encourage you, even if you are like, you think you're great and everything's going on, like that's a great time to start. Like start now, and while you're there.
Right. And that's the thing about mental health, right? Is it's the ground wire. It might be going on in the background and you think you don't need it, but whenever lightning strikes, it's good to have it, right? It keeps you from shorting out.
Yes, and so to wrap that topic up, the last thing I'll say is, we talked a little bit about the stereotypes of men and things like that. We talked a little bit about mental health. We talked about those types of things. One of the things I heard the other day that was pretty interesting was that samurais back in the day, like, what do you think of when you think of samurai?
Oh, big tough dudes with swords.
Yeah, and who dominated that part of the world forever, and they're super highly skilled, and most people would look up to them as some ideal, right? And especially of a man, right? It's like, oh, I kill things and I keep order and all that kind of stuff. But yet they also really focused on the soft skills, and they were like learned, and things like history and art and those types of things, where in today's day and age, not as masculine of traits, right? But they were in touch with that side, but yet they were also these amazingly effective military people, right?
Yeah, I think it is fascinating that we can be both. We in our current society, we really have segmented people out into specialization, and thinking that the brain, like if you're going to be a soldier, you only need to know soldier things, and this just maybe isn't true or a good way to move through life.
Right. And speaking of ways to move through life, the next thing that we're going to talk about is relationships. And we're just going to spend, for those of you at home wondering, like, man, they started a little late. Are we still going to get that full hour? Well, yes, yes, you are. Do not fear.
Lucky for y'all.
Yes.
Man. And this next little bit is going to be amazing.
It is.
I don't know what we're going
amazing.
to talk about, but it's going to be mind-blowing, I'm sure.
It is. It is for sure. And so the thing I want to talk about with relationships is a romantic relationship. You know, I was talking with a friend the other day about what does it mean to have a significant other, and what is fair to expect of that person. And it was a very like poignant question, and like I totally got why she was asking it, and it made me think. I was like, you know, I've never really sat down and really defined it and said, and you know, she was asking questions like, how often should we be talking to each other? Does texting count? You know, how often should we be hanging out? And you know, questions along those lines. And it's an interesting thing because, you know, one of the flaws that's been analyzed by about this relationship between two people over time is we've now expected more and more from that person. And that's one of the traps that people can fall into is you expect everything from your wife. Oh, you've got to be my therapist. You got to be my chef. You got to be my this, that, and the other, whatever those buckets may be. That's one of the flaws. But yeah, so what are some of your thoughts? What comes to your mind?
I mean, my initial thought to that is that people are individuals and that each relationship is unique. And the idea that we could at any point sort of stipulate out a framework and say, well, yes, you need to spend 3 hours doing this and 2 hours doing that, and blah, 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 blah. Like, this sounds like another kind of artificial construct that we put onto things. So my initial tendency on something like that is to sort of push back and look into the uniqueness of what each relationship requires. People are different. They need different things. They want different things. I think one of the things that I think about more is being respectful of that other person, paying attention to them, like listening with good intentions, and then trying to act on those. So those are the kind of things I think about when it comes to significant other relationships, and probably all relationships. And then also being honest with that person. And this is something that I'm learning about right now, is how to know what your boundaries are, what you're willing to do, and what you can do without actually growing resentful at some point, right? And so being able to trade those things off, all this requires a tremendous amount of effort and awareness. And that might be the thing about relationships that, you know, I think the quarantine has brought a lot of that to light. For sure. And that effort and awareness, I feel like those are two very key terms that Helpful for Life is going to be pushing a lot. I mean, the first step is to pay attention, step outside of your situation a little bit and look at it, analyze what's going on, what things are going well, what things are going poorly, being aware of the situation. And again, an important step there is stepping out of it to maybe, because guess what? We all have our own story. We all have our own view of how things are going, what the person is or is not doing. Guess what? That person has their view too. And both of you are kind of wrong. Yeah, I mean, that's also the fascinating spot, right? Is usually we want them to admit that they're wrong and we're right, and they want this exact same thing from us. And then the idea is like, well, how can we get this problem outside of us so that we're both standing together looking at the problem, right? Not standing facing each other in adversity, but actually side by side looking at the problem as an independent thing that we can then solve together.
Yes, that's a subtle mind shift, but it's huge, right? Going from you versus me, us versus the other, which, by the way, it gets to our caveman brain and the fact that, you know, something I'm sure I'll say many times on this show, you forget. We humans, we think we're all enlightened, you know, we have cool radio shows, we take our shirts off, we hump in the air, we're very enlightened individuals. We think we have this unlimited free will, we do whatever we want, how we want it, but we forget that at the end of the day, we are animals. There is some common programming between all of us. That's why all of us, have these, well, not all of us, but, can have these arms and eyes and ears and all these types of things, is because we are part of that same DNA. We are related. And guess what? Believe it or not, if you take 1,000 people and you expose them to the same situation, there's going to be a lot of patterns.
Yeah. Once we get to the right sample size. I mean, that's kind of what I'm curious about too. This conversation you had with this other person about relationships and like how much time do you spend together? How do you do this? How do you do? Did y'all settle on anything? Because I do know that like while one tendency in me is to push back against that kind of information, there's a lot of things we have found out through neuroscience and cognitive behavioral therapy that certain things work.
Yeah, no, for sure. And the short answer is we talked a little bit about some expectations, but I definitely emphasize the fact that everyone's different. And I think if we haven't said in the last 2 episodes, comparison is a troublesome thing to do, right? And most experts will encourage you to not do it, or at least not do it that much, because by definition you're gonna always be failing compared to some people, or be doing worse. And of course there's gonna be some people you're doing better with, so it can be good. It's like, oh well, I am failing and stuff, but at least I'm doing better than that guy.
Yeah it's such an easy thing to do, right? And once again, it goes back to the caveman stuff. And we have a great tendency to judge others and then place ourselves somewhere in there. And what's really fascinating about it is through some of Daniel Kahneman's research, then he actually talks about how we're willing to see other people suffer as long as we can position ourselves above them.
Yeah.
Right? We will also suffer. Like, while we could all have a good life, we actually want somebody else to suffer, and we will take hardship onto ourselves just so that we're not at the very bottom.
Yeah, and I think that is very present in this extremely individualistic American culture, right? And it's very much about me and mine and getting that, any way possible, which we've seen amplified a lot during the pandemic, right? You see things, and also here in Texas, back in February, we had I don't know if it is completely unprecedented, but kind of like 100-year flood type of thing, very rare. We had a whole week, at least a handful of days, where it was below freezing. And that led to pools freezing over, and our power grid completely got shot. And it affected a lot of the country, but it was especially bad here in Texas because we weren't prepared for that level of thing. But the reason I brought that up was because, I happened to be going to the store, going to Walmart or whatever for something that week. And you go and you look, and it's like, all the ramen's gone, all the dry goods gone. People turn back into that caveman. That people don't realize civilization is just a thin veneer, a thin layer around craziness, right? And once you start to take away some of the things that we think are due us, kind of like we were talking a little bit about the other day, that we deserve, that is our right, like power. And internet
and clean water
and which, by the way, a lot of times is affected by power. And once you take some of those away, people devolve real fast.
Because then how do you make alcohol to purify that water? I mean, it gets really complicated.
We just need to repeat history. I think maybe, ironically, I honestly think it might be a little better for our society if we shifted momentarily to that more slowed down and drinking alcohol all day. And just for you viewers at home, we are going to do that as an experiment and get back to you. We'll let
Next
you know
morning show, that coffee cup will not be full of coffee.
Irish coffees, here we come. But to answer a little bit more about what did I say about what expectations were and what is the right amount, things like that. And I don't think I said this yesterday, but I meant to. It's very easy, especially when we're talking about comparison and quote unquote normal, which isn't really even a thing, right? Spectrums and all that. Is it more of an average or what have you? But one of the traps we can fall into and we don't realize is, like, in our lives, even if you're an especially sociable, extroverted person, we'll just take myself for an example. Like, I love meeting all sorts of people. I go to conferences, do all those types of things, and meet all sorts of people. In my life, how many people am I going to meaningfully engage with to the point where I get a good feeling for who they are, what they do in their lives, how they potentially treat their significant other, things like that? Realistically, that's a pretty small number. And to a decent level, I would say it's tens of people to get to that level. But even if you want to be generous and say hundreds or thousands of people, there are 8 billion people in the world. Billion. That is many factors higher than the tens, hundreds, or even thousands of people that you engage with throughout your life. And oh, by the way, let's take the fact that the percentage chance of those people are coming from one of your circles or from your local, literally geographical region where people tend to have the same types of thoughts and cultures and things like that, or your job or whatever. It's easy to forget how different things can be. And so that was one of the things that I was kind of talking about with her, is it can be so different based on who you are and what you've seen in your life. And especially if you haven't had any good examples of what a positive relationship can be, then how are you supposed to know? And I was like, these are very fair questions. Like, outside of the people around you, where else do you see this, right? The only other spots is in media, right? You read things in books, you see things on movies, you see things on TV shows, which hopefully most people know. Even if it is a reality show or a fiction or whatever, like, it's for entertainment. And so it's not really reality. And it's like, that's what things are like on TV. And so, yeah, there are some things that are true, but yeah.
Yeah, I find the movie reference to be kind of fun to think about, because if people actually think, amazing dramas or whatever, something like a romance like The Notebook or whatever, is the way your relationship should play out, right? It should be that impactful and dramatic. Then it's almost like me also saying, well, I should be able to operate just like a superhero in superhero stories. It's the same level of fiction where everything is amped up on like insane levels of kind of like CGI steroids. And to sort of see that there are formulas out there for now how to hack us, how to get that emotional response, how to make us feel certain things. And that's what movies are doing so well. As long, caffeine and alcohol do it too. All these things that we intake do this to us. And then the idea that people, if you don't have some touchstones in reality with real people that have real relationships, yes, if that's your only source of thinking what a relationship is something like what you're seeing on the media, I think we all know that that's artificial, but it's also hard not to replicate something that you're constantly pumping into your head.
Absolutely. And I think that's a very important distinction to say. Like, even if we can recognize something as non-reality or whatever it is, that doesn't change the fact that that is still flooding you with impressions. And that's a big thing that I want to make sure to help teach people with Helpful for Life is, if you take a second and step out of the situation, right? And you analyze, why do I think something or why do I believe something? And you look at it and you really think the likelihood is you probably either heard it from someone in your family, someone in your friends, maybe you saw something on a social media post, and if you're like most people, you probably just read the headline and didn't actually click on the thing. And of course, social media, we get into that another day. But And maybe you learn some things from schools, which has all of its flaws as well. Yeah. And oh, by the way, they don't teach a lot of the life skills that you need. Right. Hence why Helpful for Life exists at all. But yeah, so that's an important thing to think is like, why do you think the things you do, and where did you get that from? Because the reality is a lot of it's probably not as founded as you think it is, not as well, I don't know, I like to say backed by science or large statistical studies or whatever, to get to the root of it. But obviously you can go too far down that end as well. So again, there's that balance.
Yeah, I really do think a lot of it is, and I really enjoy that you brought this up, is just like talking with actual people and the region you're in being very specific. But if you only know 10s or 20s of people and have any kind of insight at all into the relationship, that insight that you have is still probably a veneer for what's really going on.
Right. And that's another thing to easily forget, that you are only seeing kind of a TV show of that person, right? You're only seeing what they present to you, which, oh, by the way, even if it's like one of your really close friends, is probably like 1 to 5% of their life. Yeah. And that was another big learning for me when I started to have some people who in my life who started to have divorces. And it's like the natural thing is you think that those statistics don't apply to you and your group of people, right? But then they start to happen, and then that's when you start to realize, like, okay, like, yeah, every time these people were with me, they're having a great time. But then it's like, wait, when are they seeing me? Oh, every time we're hanging out, we're doing something fun. The purpose is to have a good time. Well, yeah, of course, people are going to be at least outwardly positioning that they're having a good time. And most likely they are having a good time because they're hanging out with me.
I mean, that's really why I'm here doing the morning show. Is the rest of my life is crumbling, but I know for 1 hour every day.
You know, the light, what is in the world. Again, if we happen to meet people that do those things, those saintly type of things we were saying, and they get to be part of that knighting ceremony.
Yes.
If I could be a fly on that wall.
Yeah, we'll make sure that happens.
Well, good.
We'll get a little drone camera, and when we find this saint, you'll get to watch.
Perfect. I can't wait to, take a second, step outside myself and see what that would be like.
Step outside yourself.
So, with that, I think that we have given the people, I would say what they want, but they probably didn't want this. But we have given the people an hour.
Yes, we have given them something.
We have given them something.
Man, we are
right?
just such generous people.
We are. And so if you want to continue to become such good people, we started out with failure. We had a lot of failure in the middle, and now we're ending a little bit with failure as well, because I'll let Ryder close this out. No, I'm just kidding. But yes, we talked a little bit about relationships today. We talked a little bit about mental health. Both of those things I'm sure we'll talk about more in length. And by the way, I'm not sure I ever completely answered the question in brief. I do agree with most of the things that you said, if not all of them. It coming from a place of caring, paying attention to figuring out what that person needs, helping to provide those things. But most importantly, like taking the time to, again, step outside, analyze, and see like, okay, hey, maybe our sex life isn't going as well right now. Why is that? How can we take some steps to fix that? Oh, hey, I've realized that they seem really stressed, or they're overwhelmed with this, or am I, have I done the effort to figure out how I can show love to somebody, right? And how they want to think, how they want to receive that, love languages type of thing. Yeah. So taking a little bit of that effort to figure out what that person wants, what that person's needs, and then the important one that I will add is helping that person find what they need with other people and other resources as well. That's one key part of that definition that I would make sure to include every time. Mm-hmm. And that's the one where I feel like most people miss because they are just trying to either do it all themselves or they're not really trying at all. Yeah. And the big thing is most people, I would imagine, like they're failing in these small ways day after day after day, and then they let it build up and they build up and then it gets to a point where it breaks and then there's no coming back. And so part of it is, hey, let's start having those regular intervals where you are checking in, where you are thinking about it, where you are having those conversations and being honest with one another. Because if you can't be honest and open with your significant other, then in my opinion, that is something very wrong, and that needs to be addressed earlier rather than later, because I don't see that being successful in the long term.
Well, no, and especially not if, like you said, our significant other is now forced to play a lot of roles. If they have to be both your mother, your therapist, your lover, your house cleaner, all these things, right?
But just to be clear, you said your significant other is your mother.
Yeah, a lot lot people do use their spouse or significant other as their mother.
In the like proverbial metaphorical term.
Sorry.
We haven't got into exactly where all you came from. I don't answered Arkansas joke here.
Right. It was so normal there. Yeah. That's not normal for you. No, I think that there's something sort of fascinating if you're going to put this person into all these roles. And then, yes, you would be afraid to lose them. And then that fear can often invoke a problem with having these honest conversations.
And speaking of fear and speaking of rolls, all I can think of now are rolls with some butter. I'm getting a little bit hungry. I think it's time for my breakfast for the next step in my morning routine. And hopefully it's the next step for you guys as well. So with that, we'll let it wrap up today. As a reminder today, your daily challenge is to do some type of meditation. And again, that could be, it doesn't need you to be sitting there going, although it certainly can be. It could be you just sitting there with your eyes closed thinking. It could be you doing some rote task like dishes or sweeping. It could be walking around the block. The main thing I would encourage you to is don't have stimulation in your ears. If you want to have some sort of like peaceful, calm background music without words or maybe an ocean sound, some sort of naturescape, you can do that type of thing. But don't go listening to your favorite artist while you're trying to meditate and think about your own thoughts.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Well, that is it for the daily show. Nope, that's not the name. The morning show with Helpful for Life. And this just in, it's possible we'll have a name and an intro and maybe a logo next week, but probably not. We're not going to commit to any of that. Our our producer over there is like, who's doing that works? So with that, you have a wonderful day. Get a little bit of meditation in, and maybe revisit some of those relationships that you've had. Have a great day.